Welcome. My name is Rob Claus, and I'm on the education team for the Certified Commercial Property Inspectors Association. We are the only association who is solely responsible for the support and growth of the commercial inspection industry. I have personally been a professional property inspector for over 35 years. Today, or tonight, we're going to have a conversation about inspecting multifamily properties, particularly the inspection of multifamily properties in Texas. Now, this can also transcend to just about any other state you're in, but because we're actually teasing and talking about the CCPIA convention, we're going to have some comments that are very specific to Texas. And when we look around Texas, every community has its share of some type of multi-family unit. Now, we're going to begin talking about our standard of practice. It's called the ComSOP, or the Commercial Standards of Practice. It was developed by InterNACHI many years ago, and the CCPIA, Certified Commercial Property Inspectors Association, adopted it. And then we've adjusted it, changed it, and it's become our standards of practice for the commercial inspection industry. While there are other publications that tout their providence in this ComSOP is the only standard of practice in the industry. And it's the purpose of the ComSOP that best defines the practice for establishing a very reasonable approach to the performance of an inspection of a commercial property. When we start to think about multifamily properties, it's because we have a need to fit it into our standards of practice and fit into a category that we need to understand and define. So when we think of a housing unit, it's often described as a dwelling. And a dwelling is a place where somebody has the ability to lay their head and sleep. Each separate unit is within a building. So something like a 5-unit building has 5 different dwelling units, all in the same building. So when we think of multifamily residential real estate, it's a housing classification where multiple separate housing units are on the same property, multiple dwellings being placed within that same property. Now for us, it's important that we kind of establish what is a commercial property. And over the years, I've spent hours researching other institutions, other organizations, other licensing bodies, including the 38 licensing bodies across our country that issue a private inspector's license. And my goal was to determine what's the definition of a commercial property. Most of the time there wasn't one, but not to fear. The CCPIA has a great definition that we're going to use. It's a commercial property is defined as a building, structures, and improvements located on a parcel of commercial real estate. The key is commercial real estate. These include structures such as buildings with residential units, multifamily, that are operated for profit. Mixed-use buildings, strip malls, motels, factories, storage facilities, restaurants, and office buildings. But the key takeaway is buildings being operated for profit. So that 4, 5, 6, 8 dwelling unit building being used for profit is a commercial structure and a commercial real estate. Now that we understand what commercial property is, we need to look a little bit deeper into the definition of multifamily because it relates to these commercial properties so closely. In other words, a multifamily property, again, is providing accommodation for more than one dwelling unit. A multifamily property could be in two different categories. Buildings that are 2 to 4 units, which are usually classified as residential style properties, or 5 units or greater, which really falls into commercial. And some of that is defined by our license categories. So when we talk about license categories, let's think of TREC. And since we're here to specifically talk about Texas, then TREC defines a commercial property. Wait, TREC doesn't define commercial property. In fact, when I talk about my exhaustive research, most of the states of those 38 states with licensure, they have a really good definition of what a home inspection is. They really clearly define what the purpose of a residential property entails. They really do a very good job on the residential side, but they don't clearly define commercial. So in the non-licensed, never gone to school, never educated, never practiced law that I am, and being a non-licensed, non-practicing attorney, I would say if the property is not residential by definition, then it must be commercial. Okay, so let's look specifically at TREC and how they define a home inspection. Specifically, I'm looking at 535.277 subparagraph A, scope. The standard of practice apply when a professional inspector or real estate inspector who is licensed under this chapter accepts employment to perform a real estate inspection for a prospective buyer or seller of real property, real estate. These standards of practice under paragraph 2, these standards of practice define the minimum requirement for a real estate inspection conducted on 1 to 4 family unit that is substantially completed. Substantially completed means the stage of construction when a new building, addition, improvement, or alteration to an existing building can be occupied or used for its intended purpose. The key takeaway for TREC 535.277, paragraph 2, is conducted on a 1 to 4 unit property. So that means at the 5th unit, that's no longer residential, that's commercial. So what I'm saying is, if it's not a home, it must be commercial. The building on the left in this image I'm showing is a nice, simple duplex or a 2-unit dwelling building. There are 2 separate dwellings under the same roof, joined by a common wall, but this is a residential property which can be inspected by a residential inspector. The building on the right is a 6-unit building. There are 6 dwelling units under the same roof or located at the same address. This would not be a home inspection or residential property. It is commercial property. To look back at the CCPIA definition, this is a building being operated for profit. While the building on the left, you could own both halves. You could rent both halves out. You could never reside in those. But by the definition provided that is a residential property. On the right, you could own that building. You could live in one of the units. You could rent out the other 5 units. But because this is greater than 4 units, again, this is now considered in the eyes of the definition 535.277, paragraph 2, a commercial property. Or in the omission of saying commercial property, it is not residential property. So now when I stand back, now that we have a clear understanding of the difference between residential and commercial, I need to ask a simple question. Do you need to have a license in Texas to perform commercial inspections? No. Remember how TREC defines residential inspection. It is a building that is between 1 and 4 units. So as soon as we, they, or anyone adds that 5th unit to the building, it became a commercial property and is outside of the TREC license. Think about that. Maybe you want to bring in an assistant inspector who might not be licensed. This would allow for that. Maybe you want to suspend your license or only do commercial inspections. This would allow for that. I mean, the possibilities are endless when you think about it. Because, again, anything larger than the 4th unit, which would be 5th and above, does not require that TREC licensure. So now when we stand back and think about and understand our opportunities, then we can finally start to talk about multifamily property inspections. These are very unique, but similar, all in the same breath. You could be called upon to inspect anything up to, in a high rise or an inner city building, or maybe a suburban apartment building, or maybe that rural 6 unit built over in this small town. Regardless of the type of the building, you need to create a plan for how you're going to do your inspections, how you're going to do every step of the process. Now, I'm a very regimented inspector. I try to perform every inspection I do in the very same manner so that I'm creating a predictable outcome. In fact, because of these habits, I know exactly what I can perform in a day as far as numbers. And this allows me to help predict and do larger work and predict my physical time allotments necessary to perform that building with accuracy. So in my regimented procedure, I like to do every inspection top down. I do top down for a simple reason. I'm following the flow of water. I'm following water from the roof leak all the way down to the lowest level. I'm following the flow of the building. I always laugh. I say, yeah, when I fall down the stairs, I'm still inspecting. I'm following the flow of the building. I'm making my plan. So when I'm looking at every project, even long before I showed up to the project, and I'm looking at it through a picture or an internet image, I am physically making my plan on paper or mentally making my plan of doing that. I always go outside to inside. I do the outside before I do the inside. I do the outside before I do the inside because I'm following water. Very rarely does water damage occur from the inside going to the outside. Maybe if your water bed leaks and it leaks out the walls, maybe. Maybe if you got a plumbing pipe burst and it pushes out the side of the wall, maybe. Maybe if it's Jumanji and the floods break in the game and it floods out the front door, maybe. But odds are most of our water is going to be an outside to inside migration. And plus, on the outside, that's where the good stuff is. That's where I'm looking at balconies and patios and parking areas and garbage corrals and and siding and windows, and there's just so much fun stuff to play with because again, like I said, I'm looking at the parking areas. You don't think too much about the parking areas, but they're expensive. In the commercial world, we call that part of the big three. The big three in commercial is always the roof, the HVAC, and the parking area. Those are the three most expensive items that we're going to find in any commercial building. I try to be very efficient when I do multifamily inspections. My efficiency begins with how I go through the process of the inspection. I'm a snap and go. I take a ton of pictures. I have a very specific order to my pictures. I do all my note taking with my pictures, and I snap, I go, I snap, I go, I snap, I go. I'm probably only in the typical 2-bedroom, 1-bath, kitchen, living room, hallway apartment for 8 to 12 minutes, maybe 15 minutes max. And then I'm off to the next one because I'm not doing anything other than photos as far as my note taking. I have some other steps I'm going to do as far as my inspection goes, checking receptacles, testing HVAC, etc. But as far as my documentation goes, I'm not spending any time in any adapted softwares. I'm not doing anything, writing any notes down. It's all being done with my photos. Because at the end of the day, time is money. I'm trying to figure out how efficiently and effectively I can move through it. Because if I have people with me, like my clients, they don't want to sit there watching me go real slow. They want this bang, bang, boom. But at the same point, I'm understanding their needs and I'm answering their questions and I'm giving them the data they need. Plus, if I've done all these steps, I can create a scalability. I know that I can do 50 units in a day. 50 units. That means 25 in the morning, 25 in the afternoon. So if I've got a 25 unit building, I know that's going to take me a half a day. If I have a 50 unit, I know it's going to take me a full day. I know if I've got 75 units, it's going to take me a day and a half. So I can do that scaling so that I can create a predictive time allotment, which then allows me to help create a standard for which I use to price and make a modeling so that I can be fair to my clients and profitable for me and my company. So again, beyond those examples of out to in, top down, snap, go, and speed, I'm also looking at the building with its systems and through that gaze. Most buildings have some form of repeated system design. All the bathrooms will look the same. All the mechanicals are in the same location. All the kitchens will have similar appurtenances. This again gives me my opportunity for scale. These are not 6 units, and each unit is custom. This one's 1 bedroom, this one's 3, this one's 4, this one's 2, this one's another 1. There's some predictability. And if there's not, then I have found that out before I even went through the research phase, long before I even developed my fee structure that I presented to my clients and subsequently won because it was the fee that my clients went with. I already knew what systems are present in that building. So instead of having to relearn or refamiliarize myself when I go in each unit, I was prepared and ready for each unit long before I even went in. I already knew I've got a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I already know I got my kitchen. I already know my living room. I already know I got a mechanical in the unit, or I've got centralized mechanical units that are located in one large mechanical room. My goal is to get in, be proficient, be an expert, be superior, and then get out as efficiently and quickly as possible so that I can go to the next unit, go to the next unit. I'll do my report later. My report will be done back at my office. My report will be done long after this inspection. One of the most common questions and most important questions always arises when I talk about commercial property inspections is the inspection fee. It is completely illegal for me to talk about specifically what you're going to charge, but I can talk about different variables you need to consider. These variables could include base rates, the exteriors in common. You might have a price per unit based on size of the units in bedrooms or square footage. You might even have a type. To me, I think there are 3 types of multifamily. I think we have the luxury apartments, we have the moderate apartment, and then we might have the subsidized apartment. But each one of those will have different layers or levels of build out, or as I say, appurtenances or systems. I might have higher end bathrooms or in luxury and not as higher end in subsidized. I might have a nice moderate in the moderate. I might have the mechanicals being, are they centralized mechanicals or common? Up north, we'll see boilers, and there'll be one boiler for the entire building. And some places I might find forced air units in each unit. But I knew that long before I showed up. Then I might even have a variable as far as my pricing goes, whether I work alone or have somebody come with me. Because again, I run a for-profit company. When I'm doing inspections, I try to make sure that I'm making a profit every day. I need to account for if I've used anybody else. But pricing is one of those dynamics that needs to be discussed. So with that, I know our time is short. This has been a very brief introduction in multifamily inspections. We have online courses tailored to help our members trudge through their launch of their commercial inspection endeavors. We also have a very special event coming up very soon on our horizon. I personally will be at the CCPIA convention, October 18th. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to spend time specifically breaking down all of the myths and opportunities with multifamily inspections. We will also, through the use of technology, perform a portion of a multifamily inspection so that you can further understand these opportunities that are right in front of you. So again, to CCPIA Convention, October 18th at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to be hosting a session specifically for multifamily inspectors. Thank you. And on behalf of the entire team at the CCPIA, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Dallas at the CCPIA Convention.